I got called into an actual heavenly session. First, he had the ladies shower together to be completely clean, and you were supposed to wash each other, and a prayer was said while you washed each other and touched each other in certain places and all that. In the one I was in, I did not experience him go into the convulsions, or maybe they had already happened, because by the time I got in there, other ladies were already in there and he was laying on the floor. Then it was like everybody working together to through sexual excitement and whatever, bringing him back to life because he had atoned for the people. I look back on it. It was very uncomfortable, but at the same time, if you didn't give the right reaction, the consequence was either getting sent away or getting shunned because you didn't give the right reaction. So you wouldn't get to be a part of another one for a long time until you said your prayers and repented and was righteous enough. And this was the new way to have a child.
Oh my gosh.
So if you wanted to get pregnant, you had to be good enough to be in one of these.
Hey, my name is Shelise Ansola, and this is Cults to Consciousness, where we discuss leaving high-demand religions or organizations and finding healing and independence through awareness and true individual sovereignty. As always, if you are only listening and you'd like to see our faces, you can go to our YouTube channel at Cults to Consciousness, where you can subscribe, join in on the conversation. We love seeing those comments, those words of encouragement for our guests who are coming on and sharing their stories. So today's guest, I was excited to be connected to her from, again, Sam and Melissa from Growing Up in Polygamy. And we alluded to her story in one of our live streams where we were speaking about Ammon's story, who we also got and we're so excited about, sort of stealing all their guests. She was the 13th wife of Warren Jeffs, the prophet, the leader of the FLDS church, which is the Fundamentalist Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. She was married to him when she was only 16. We're going to be talking about her story growing up in the FLDS. A reminder for those who aren't familiar, this is an offshoot of the mainstream Mormon church. This is not the big one that you see today with the missionaries coming and knocking on your door. This is the fundamentalist branch that continued to practice polygamy, obviously, if she was his 13th wife. We're going to talk about what it was like when she was sent to Texas, what happened when the police came and raided the compound and took a bunch of the children away. So she is now his ex-wife and not afraid to come out and tell her story. So thank you so much for joining us, Ada Marie.
Thank you so much, Shelise, for having me. I'm grateful to be here today. Thank you.
Yeah, you did an interview with Sam and Melissa that was 6 or 8 hours long. I don't know how you did it. And so anyone who is watching this and wants to know the full, uncut, extended version, you can go to their page and watch that.
Yes, I hope I don't bore the guests, but I want to say thank you to them because it really did feel good to just sit down and tell the whole thing. Mm-hmm. And I've always been a person that has a hard time leaving out the details. So it was very, very healing to me. I'm grateful for that opportunity.
Yeah, that's really incredible. There is something special about being able to just get it off your chest. I know when I did my interview on Mormon Stories, I learned so much about myself in those 3 hours. And I had told my story over and over in other podcasts, but something about that long form really does something to you. So that's great. I'm glad you had that opportunity. We keep ours to about an hour and a half. So this will be the shortened, condensed version of all the main plot points. So I think we have to start. You just told me this off camera and it blew my mind. Can we talk about your name and how it flip-flopped and why?
Yes. So growing up, my name is Ada Marie Draper, but growing up, I was nicknamed Amy by my family. When I started going to school, I had to be called Ada because there was another Amy in my class. But when I got married to Warren, I was known as Amy. And then about a year or so later, he did also get another lady named Ada. So I was known as Amy. But about, I don't know, it was probably 2012 or 2013. He sent a message to the family. He was changing some of the ladies' names, even two ladies that had the same name, telling them that their name was an evil name. So he gave them a totally different name. But around this time, he sent a revelation to the family telling them to call me now Ada Marie. not just Ada or not Amy anymore, but Ada Marie. That is my legal name, so that is what I go by now today as well.
That is so interesting. This is a revelation he gave from prison then.
Yes. Yeah, he had been in prison for quite a few years at that time.
What was your reaction to this? What were other people's reactions? I think you said the evil name was Colleen or Colleen.
Colleen. Mm-hmm.
Interesting. Okay, so what are their reactions like? Oh no, I have to change my name?
I mean, I was a person that was so brainwashed, you would say, just so wanting to do everything just right, that if he gave any kind of directive for you personally, it was actually such a privilege and an honor.
Oh, okay.
I can't speak for these other ladies that got their name and had to wonder or whatever why their name wasn't a good name. But I remember thinking, at least my name's not a bad name. You know, he just changed it back to my original name, and I didn't have to get used to something totally different.
Yeah.
Because we all had to get used to calling these other ladies by something totally different, and it was kind of weird and different.
Mm-hmm.
But for us, it was just this privilege and honor if he ever said almost anything to you, even though sometimes it was weird and strange. So,
yeah. That's so interesting. So I'm excited to hear more of your perspective about him, having been married to him. Let's talk about the early years and your first memories of him. I think it was when he was the principal, right before he was a prophet?
Yes. So me growing up in the FLDS religion is kind of different than what you hear from most people. I grew up in the late 80s, early 90s, and it was a lot more free for our family. The experience that you had in the FLDS religion depends on the years that you grew up, the place that you grew up, whether it was Short Creek, Salt Lake, or Canada, and then how strict the different fathers implemented the rules. And not to say that fathers were bad if they weren't as strict. It's just how it was.
Mm-hmm.
So for my family, we were actually quite relaxed. I grew up watching movies. We had TV. We had a Nintendo. I remember playing Mario Brothers and Ninja Turtles, and went to public school when I was younger, first through 7th grade in Short Creek. I was able to get books from the library and read. So we used to go to St. George, and I remember actually swimming in the public swimming pool. We would go bowling, go skating in the skating rink there. So I had a pretty normal childhood, you would say, as you might call normal with the world. And I enjoyed it a lot. I have really fond memories of our family singing around the piano together. I had 2 brothers that got into barbershop. And I mention this because now whenever I hear barbershop music, it just fills my soul with joy. But they would sing together in the living room, and we would go to their shows. They competed. I would go watch them live and stuff like that in the Rocky Mountain District. So just lots of good memories. We had Thanksgivings. We didn't have Christmas, but we did have New Year's parties. We would have Super Bowl Sundays where everybody would gather and watch the Super Bowl. And so it was a lot of fun.
For those who aren't familiar, everything you just listed would have been banned later on, right? Most of the things you listed.
Yes.
Okay, so that's why you're saying, yeah, it was pretty normal because we could do all these fun things, where afterwards certain books were banned or most books were banned, and you couldn't swim and you couldn't go to movies, you couldn't watch movies. Some of the toys were even taken away from the kids. So very different experience. And then I want to know why you didn't celebrate Christmas.
That's just how it was all the time with me through my growing up years. So my grandfather is Leroy S. Johnson, which was the prophet before Reuben Jeffs.
Oh.
I think I remember reading in his sermons when he told the people, let's get rid of the Christmas tree. And I think it was kind of an idol. They were trying to get rid of idol worshiping things or things that just served as an idol. And he told the people to focus more around that time on Joseph Smith's, I can't remember if it's his birthday or his martyrdom. I think it's his birthday is around the end of December. So that's what the people were supposed to remember because also we did not believe that the Savior was born on December 25th. We believe that he was born on April 6th.
And that's so interesting about Christmas. This is the first time I'm hearing about this, and we've done a few FLDS videos. So, okay, interesting. So, your childhood is fairly normal and loving, and it sounds like you had a good childhood. Is there anything that you want to talk about that was less than ideal in your childhood?
I will say that I did experience immoral conduct was happening in the family between siblings. That happened to me when I was quite small, and I have these faint memories of it. And I chose to just keep it quiet. I didn't even tell my mom. She didn't even find out until we reconnected just a few years ago, and as sharing experiences. And she was just appalled. Or if I had told her, she didn't remember. So that could have been a possibility as well.
Yeah.
And I wanted to point out, I'm finding out more and more that happened a lot in the community. And I'm not trying to down everybody, but what I would say is it's more likely to happen in these huge families with lots of kids. And for one thing, you don't have the sex education, and you're always taught it's bad, don't do it, don't talk about it. So you've got people getting older that are getting curious. I think it happens not always in a mean way, like, your older siblings are trying to be mean to you. I think they were exploring, curious of what things were going on. And because they didn't get to have girlfriends or whatever, then it's likely to happen to a younger sister.
Okay.
So
I'm sorry that happened. I think we should talk about your family dynamic. So what was it like in your home? How many moms were there? How many siblings? What did that look like?
In all, my dad in polygamy had 6 wives, but before I was 4 years old, 2 of them had left him and taken their children with them. So growing up for me, I only had 4 moms, and I loved all my moms. I don't remember. I know that there was, and especially when I was younger in the earlier days when we lived in Salt Lake, because I lived in Salt Lake till I was about 4. And then we moved south when my grandfather, Leroy Johnson, died. So I know there was jealousies and fights and problems and stuff, but I never have any memories of my moms screaming and hitting each other or anything like that. It was, I think the jealousies were more inward, or if there was arguments, it wasn't, I don't remember that. Some of my older siblings maybe did. I am the second to the youngest child of, my dad had 36 kids in all. My mom was his 3rd wife. She had 10 children, 9 boys and 1 girl.
Oh my gosh, that must have been so rowdy. 9 boys.
Yeah. The house that she lived in usually had all the boys in it. And there was usually more than one mother. Like when I was younger, my daddy had 2 homes too. So a couple of the moms were in one house, a couple of the moms were in another house. And so obviously, because my mom had more boys than girls, then she was with where all the boys were.
Wait, so were you in that house as well with all the boys, or you were in a different one?
Yes. I was with my mom in the house. Wherever she was, I was.
Okay.
And what mom stayed at what house changed. My dad would switch that up sometimes, not often, but sometimes. So like I remember going out, we called it the farm. I remember going out to the farm and getting to play out there. That was funner to be at because it had a basketball court, and my memories are real faint, but we had a dog out there that was named Chip, and the avenues was clear up downtown Salt Lake, and your yard was really, really close to your neighbor. And there was just an alley that my brothers had pigeons in the back alley. I remember when I was little, it was huge, but I've gone back and visited and I'm like, that alley is so teeny.
So just on a whim, he would be like, all right, you guys switch houses. That must have been chaotic.
Yeah, I don't have a lot of memories of that, and I haven't asked my older siblings a lot about it. I don't think it was pick up all your stuff and move. I think it was like, come stay at the farm for a couple weeks. It was more like pack your bags kind of thing, I guess.
I'm trying to put myself in your shoes, being the youngest of so many siblings, plus the 36, well, not 36 others, but 36 in total, and all the different moms and switching the house. Did you feel like you had a lot of stability growing up, or was everything just kind of moving pieces?
That was all in the Salt Lake days. I was 4 when we moved there. So I just have these few little faint memories. When we moved south, then life was stable. A home was built for our family, And that's where we lived. That's where we stayed.
The whole family.
Yes. So by that time, it was down to 4 moms. I want to say, I can't remember the number of children right off the top of my head, but it would have probably been about 20. And the children were getting older, getting jobs, and getting married. So as that was happening, they were moving out and starting their own families.
Right. Okay, so we have a good idea of your childhood situation. Let's go back to your relationship with Warren, the first time you saw him, interacted with him, your impressions of him.
Okay, the very first time I ever remember Warren, I was in 5th grade, so I would have been 10 years old. I went to Salt Lake to stay with my brother because one of my brothers had stayed in that area, and he was actually a teacher at Alta Academy, and he was working very closely with Warren, was trusted by Warren a lot. Went to visit him. I wanted to go to school with his wife's sister that was my age, so my friend, and you had to go shake hands with Mr. Jeffs if you were a guest at his school. So I remember going up after morning class. That was the devotional in the morning that he always had, shaking his hand, and my brother was like, she's here to visit. And he was going to have me go to a different classroom than where my friend was. And so I was like scared. And then my brother says, well, she's here with so-and-so. And he says, oh, okay, well, she can go in her class. So that's my first memory. I just shook his hand and said hello. But then when I was in 8th grade, I do remember like by this time he had started speaking in meetings somewhat, not a lot yet, but he would get called on. I don't really remember yet thinking he was just this great important person. I knew he was the principal up there at Alta Academy. So when I was in 8th grade, I moved back to Salt Lake to go to school at Alta Academy. My mom took me in to see him at the beginning of the year, and she was a proud mama of her little girl. I had been a straight A student. She brings all my report cards in to try to show him how good of a student I was. And we're reporting in because now we're coming up here to Salt Lake to your school. And it was a private school. I had been in public school up to that time. He didn't hardly bat an eye at my grades or anything. He put them down and he said, I don't need these. And he looked at me and he said, are you ready to work hard? And I said, yes, I am. And he says, okay, that's all I need to know. We left the visit. During this year, my mama got remarried. I guess I forgot to say my daddy died when I was 10. So she was single for 3 years. And then when she got remarried, she was remarried to this man for time and all eternity. And looking back at my younger self, I was confused at why this was happening because I couldn't recall being told by people or the leaders of the church any reason why my mama wouldn't be able to stay with my dad.
In the afterlife.
We had the same kind of beliefs, in the afterlife that you're with your family. What I do remember, though, is sleeping with my sister, which she was a sister from another mother, saying, well, we're still going to be sisters forever. This was what was in my mind as, a teenager now. And because mom's going to be with dad for eternity on the other side. And I just was confused why this would be this way. And her mother had got remarried a week before my mom, and the same thing had happened. I think that first confusion came after her wedding.
Maybe let's touch on that real quick because I think that's an important doctrine. As far as I'm aware, growing up in mainstream Mormonism, women cannot be sealed to more than one man. So they have to get, as far as I remember correctly, they have to get it approved from the higher ups in the church. So they have to send it all the way up to the top and get it approved to be divorced eternally from their husband so they can get sealed to a new husband. Let's say even if it was an abusive situation, you have to get it approved to get a divorce, an eternal divorce, and then get resealed. But men can be sealed. If their wife dies, they can be sealed to as many women as they want. So is that the situation where they were trying to divorce your mother eternally so that she could get resealed to this new husband?
I would say yes, same concept, but I don't know that our church had all those meetings. And I know there were church records because I saw a little bit of them later, when they were all at the ranch and got taken by the state of Texas. But LDS church is so organized and have all these forms that you have to sign and all that kind of stuff or whatever. We were not like that. It was just like, if the prophet said this is what we do, then this is what we do. And if there was records, I mean, I know there was church records and marriage records and stuff, but we didn't have to go fill them out and all that kind of stuff. It was just, I don't know how that was done.
Okay. So now you have a stepdad. What kind of family did that bring? Was that a whole other bunch of siblings that you got?
Yes. My mom was my stepdad's fourth wife now, and he had a huge family. I absolutely loved my 3 years in this family. So obviously, you're going to have sister problems when you have 7 girls sharing a room together. Also, you're going to have a little bit of jealousies. I was a new girl coming into the family, and I will say that I had a very likable personality. And so I did have a sister, maybe sisters, that were a little bit jealous of that. There was a little bit of problem there. And this is also where, when I moved up there, my life changed as far as all that freeness of, doing all the normal things when I was a child. The family dynamic was so enjoyable and fun to me because it was such a large scale. We had this huge, my stepdaddy lived in like the subdivision in Salt Lake, and all his brothers had homes in the subdivision. So the cousins could all gather up together on this field and play a huge game of soccer or whatever you wanted to play. So we would have these huge canning projects of canning applesauce or tomatoes or whatever it was for our food storage. We had gardens and orchards, and music has been a big part of my life. We lived at the top of this golf course hill. So I remember if I was ever stressed or down or the way I handled it, I would go to the top of that hill and sing at the top of my lungs and just let my voice go out over the golf course hill.
Nice. That sounds awesome.
I do need to say here that during going to school here at Alt Academy is where I remember up to this time, like having conversations with my girlfriends. I can't ever remember really thinking that you didn't want to live polygamy or you did, because I remember seeing men that only had one wife and kind of thinking that they were bad. I say that carefully because it's like they needed to have more than one wife to get into the celestial kingdom.
Right.
And so as I'm getting older, it's not really a thought of if I want to live polygamy or not. That's what we know we have to live to get to the celestial kingdom. But it was like, what number of wife do you want to be? I did want to be the first one when I was younger. But then when I started going to school and going to these classes that Warren was teaching to the girls at home ec on Fridays, my mind switched because of the indoctrination that I was getting from him through those trainings. Then I started thinking, okay, I really want to live polygamy. Probably would want to be like the third or the fourth wife. I don't want to be the first wife because she's probably going to be the most jealous to watch all the ladies come into the family. And anyway, had all these reasons of why I thought the third or the fourth would be the best one.
Oh my gosh. So Warren was teaching a class about marriage to young girls.
Yes. In high school there at Alta Academy on Fridays, the boys would go and get a class from one of the men. And it was kind of the same thing, teaching them to be good fathers. But they also had what was called construction on Fridays. And they went and learned construction skills. Girls went and had a little class with Warren. And there was a book that the church had published called The Enlightened Truth. And that was our text that we would go through. And so his lessons were like touching the topics in this book. And there was all sorts of chapters on, how to work with children, how to be a good wife, what kind of entertainment to have in your home with your children. Anyway, I could go on and on, but that was our text that we were reading, and we would be assigned what to read until the next Friday. But in that class, he pointed out 3 things, and they've stuck with me to this day, that a girl should pray for to prepare for marriage. And she was to pray to be given to a man that could exalt her. She was to pray for a man that could help her raise her children in enlightened truth. And then you were supposed to pray that the channel would be clear when it came time for you to get married.
What does that mean?
Praying the channel would be clear was that the Lord could speak to the prophet who you belong to. And you would be clean and pure so that channel wouldn't be obstructed in any way. So that's what was your Like I remember as a teenager fighting, not thinking about the boys and stuff because I want that channel to be clear because I want the Lord to be able to say to the prophet who I belong to.
Okay. Interesting. Do you still have access to that book you mentioned?
I do, actually. Yes, I do have the book.
Oh my gosh, I want to do an entire episode on that book. I want to read it. I want to see what's in there. I'm just so curious.
The book was a compilation of quotes from the prophets. So like it would have a heading, how to be a good wife or whatever. Okay. And I believe Warren put this together under his father's direction, clear back in the early 90s. So then it would have like a quote taken from Uncle Roy with a paragraph talking about this topic and Uncle Rulin talking about this topic. As far as I can remember, that book did not have Warren's specific words himself because he wasn't a prophet at that time. He was just his father's helper. So it was it had Brigham Young, it had John Taylor in it, different quotes from the leaders of the church.
Oh boy.
And it was given to couples when they got married to help them in their marriage. It was kind of like our guide for marriage life.
Well, knowing the stand-up guy that Brigham Young was, I can only imagine the quotes that are in there from him.
Yeah.
Yikes. Let's move on to when you realize you are going to be the wife of Warren Jeffs, who has been your school teacher for this long.
Yes. So I had become best friends with Warren's second daughter. Mm-hmm. I had not a lot, but a more insight of his family than other girls, I would say. And me losing my daddy when I was as young as I did, I was always longing for a father-daughter relationship in my life. And when my mom married my stepdad, he fulfilled that. I love my stepdaddy to pieces. I always will. He was there in my teenage years, and I really love that man forever. But then I got to see how Warren was with his daughters. I remember noticing that the girls would give him a kiss on the cheek whenever they saw their father. Like he would have these girl nights where they would, or girl, like go out and eat or go out and do something with his daughters. Warren is actually my stepdaddy's nephew. So there was like a birthday program, Warren's birthday program that our family was invited to. And I got to see they would do these skits and sing songs and stuff like that just really was intriguing to me. And I really just loved their family dynamic that I saw. And when I would think about the things I was supposed to pray for in a man, then I actually wanted to marry Warren because he seemed to fit the bill.
Sure.
Especially when I saw him with his younger children. He was very darling to his younger children, and the younger ones loved him. I loved to see how he greeted them, and he'd pick them up and, just show them attention. Back then, he noticed all of them all the time, and I really appreciated that. I really liked that I saw in him. So here I am kind of having these feelings of maybe I would want to marry him, but I was embarrassed. I didn't want to, going back to that praying the channel would be clear. I didn't want to ever have to go see the prophet and actually have to say, I was thinking of marrying Warren, because by that time Warren had become Uncle Rulin's first counselor. And he was usually there when a father would bring his daughter and, like, we would call it turn them in. Like the father would come and present his daughter to the prophet for marriage. So I was like, I know if I go have this meeting with my stepdaddy and get turned in, if they ask, because they'll ask you if you have anybody in mind. And if you don't tell the truth, Warren always taught us too, that if you don't tell the truth at that time, that can mar the channel. The channel could not be clear as well. And so I was a little embarrassed of having to say the truth. The way it turned out for me, I didn't have that personal interview or appointment, you might say. Somehow, quite a number of my sisters' names were given to the prophet all at one time. And Warren called my stepdaddy, actually asking him who he thought me and one of my other sisters belonged to. And so, if I remember the story correctly, he said, think about it. Warren said, think about it and I'll call you back or whatever. So my stepdaddy was praying fervently. And for the way we were living at that time, I feel like my stepdaddy was doing the best that he knew how. I don't hold this against him for doing this to me, or anything, and I don't know if the little things of how he saw that I was friends with his daughter. And I really did get close to my stepdaddy, as far as like, I would let him know how I was feeling. And Warren was teaching this all the time, like, get close to your fathers, get close to your fathers. And so I tried to build this relationship with him. So he knew all my thoughts and desires. And he said he felt impressed that I belonged to Warren. So he calls Warren back, or Warren called him in a little bit, or whatever happened. And he told him that he thought that I belonged to Warren. And Warren said, oh, no. Long story short, I got married to him.
Wait, why did he say no? You said that part.
So I was kind of rushing to, like, the day we got married. He had one of the ladies in his room, and he was like, I'm getting married again. And she's like, you are? Because he had gotten married 2 weeks before this to a girl my same age. And actually, she had been a classmate of mine in my elementary grades in public school. And he's like, I'm getting married again. And she's like, you are? And he said, yeah. And she said, to who? And he said, to Amy Steed. And that was my stepdaddy's last name. And she said, she's like freaking out. And he said, I was never going to marry Amy. And I try to look back, and I remember going to him and asking him after, how long did you know that you were going to marry me? Because I will say some of Warren's wives wanted to marry him and asked for him. Some of Warren's wives were given because that's who their father suggested they should marry. And some of them, actually, I remember hearing stories that they didn't really want to get married to him, but they had to, because that's who
he picked.
I guess I should have said it this way. Some of Warren's ladies asked to marry him. Some of Warren's I feel like Warren had his eye on some of his ladies. But he said to me, I didn't know only the day that we found out. And because of our past and our family, like my biological family, they all went to school at Alta Academy, and he had a lot to do with my older siblings and stuff. I just kind of feel like he never really expected to marry me. But how my life switched, and I was in my stepdaddy's family, and it was more closer to Warren's family, I feel like that's how I got there. I don't feel like he had his eye on me, but everybody can make their own conclusions, I guess.
Yeah, that's interesting. So he's claiming that he didn't want to marry you, but since your stepdad said, I think she belongs to you, he's like, oh, okay, I guess I'll take her. Something like that?
Yeah. Yes. And I will say that, like, this little story I didn't hear until after I had reconnected with my siblings. And it was kind of one of my little shelf breakers. But my brother told me back in those days, because he got married just a couple years before me, he said he went and saw Rulon Jeffs personally and asked about his situation with marriage or whatever. He had some questions. And Rulon Jeffs told him, this is how it works. He said, the people are so vast, meaning there's so many people, I can't have a personal relationship with everybody. So I rely on the fathers for help. And when my brother told me that, I was like, what? Wait a minute. So you mean to tell me that this marriage by revelation thing wasn't always marriage by revelation? It was kind of a shelf breaker to me. Like, he's just turning to the fathers, help me know where your daughter belongs. But he also said, I ask the fathers for help and then I pray about it. So.
Well, I think you're a catch, Ada Marie, and he was so lucky to be married to you. So what did your best friend think if you all of a sudden became her mom?
She was sweet to me, but it was weird for her. I remember her, she gave me a picture of her I read it just the other day. She had written on the end of it, "Dear Mother Amy." And she's like, "I'm getting used to that. It's been weird, but I'm so glad you're in our family." But she did say after a little while, she said, "I ain't going to make any more friends because all my friends marry father."
Oh, that's so sad.
Yeah, the next 2 or 3 ladies that got married after me were her friends as well and were my friends.
Oh, man.
So,
were any of your sisters also married to him?
no, not any of my biological sisters. I did have a distant relative from my mama's side of the family that was married to him. And and it's funny because your mentality back then, I always wanted a sister to marry him. I always wanted to have a sister wife.
That's just what to say. Okay.
And that might have also been, I mean, my mom had that. 2 of my moms were sisters. So my mom and her sister were married to my dad. So I don't know. You see it when you're a kid. So you think you want it when you get older.
You think you want it
kind of thing.
until you have to share your husband with your sister. And then you're like, wait, this is different than I thought.
Yeah.
So what was it like being married to Warren? What were your first experiences like with him?
Okay. So I get into his family, and because I kind of knew everybody, it was a little bit, I don't want to say comfortable, but it wasn't like I was going into a strange environment. I also had been helping teach school. His daughter, that was my best friend, and her mom had been teaching 2nd grade in his home. The family was familiar to me, but now here I'm supposed to create this relationship with Mr. Jeffs, which was different, but I thought that it was the right thing I was supposed to be doing. So I'm like trying to make it work out. I had a hard time talking to him personally. I could write him a letter and like pour out my heart and say whatever I wanted to say. But I remember one time trying to talk to him, and I was like, "Can I come talk to you in your room?" And he's like, "Yeah." So we go in there, and I'm trying to open up and maybe he used this phrase of "get close to me, ladies." And I thought that it was like letting him know your past and I don't know, the things you would share with your husband. Okay.
Emotionally.
So, yeah. So I'm trying to let this out, and like I'm shaking and my voice gets all shaky. And I was silent first for a little while, and I was kind of shaking, and I went to talk, and he's like, "Are you going to say something?" And I says, "Just give me a minute. This is," I was scared. And anyway, I finally start talking, and he's like, "Are you saying this are you trying to tell me these things because of," I guess we had a mother's class or something, and he was encouraging us to get close and open up to him or whatever. And I said, "Yeah." And he says, "Well, let's save this for another time." And I was like, "Oh, okay."
Oh, he just shut you down like that?
Yeah. And then I had the experience of, I guess I want to be a voice for the ladies that everybody thinks of Warren, and they think he gets married to these young girls and he throws them down and has sex with them in the bed or whatever. Well, there's a different side of the story as well. The day I got married, I got sent to my own room, and I slept in my room for 2 weeks before anything. I mean, looking back on it, I was only 16, so that's fine. But as a husband-wife relationship, I'm like, am I doing something wrong? What am I bad? What's wrong with me to be treated like this?
And had you learned about sex now that you were married? Did someone give you some sort of manual so you understood what was coming?
No. So I had no sex education. When I had started my menstrual cycle, it was only shown to me, how to wear pads, but the being told and taught what happens to a girl when she starts her period and stuff, none of that had been explained to me. And I do remember knowing that it took a man and a lady to have a baby, but my sex education was 0. Mm-hmm. So the first time we were together intimately, after all was said and done, he was like, "Tell me if you're pregnant." And it was just like a blow in the water. I was like, whoa. And I said, "I better not be pregnant." And that's all I really remember of the conversation at that moment. But long story short, he was offended at that and took it as I did not want to have children. So I was left alone for 6 months. I remember after a month or so, like wondering what I did wrong, but me not being able to communicate with him very good. I couldn't just walk up to him and say, hey, what's going on? I just wondered if this was what happened. And there's something that he used to always tell us that I can see the whole reason why, which was terrible, why he would say this, but he'd always tell us, ladies, don't ever talk about our intimate relationships with another sister wife. So I couldn't go to another sister wife and say, hey, this is what's happening to me. Is this what's happening to you or whatever? Yeah. Is this normal? So I'm living in this wonderment of what I did wrong for 6 months.
Oh, man.
When I look back on that time, I remember now that he would publicly say, like in front of, let's say all the ladies were sitting up in the living room and I would come in, or if I went up to say hi to him, or somehow he'd bring it up and say, you were the one that didn't want children. You were the one that didn't want children. And I remember it frustrating me so bad and saying, that's not what I meant. And just being so upset because I did want to have children, and people can say, yeah, you're 17 and you want to have a child, but the lady that got married right after me, a month and a half after me, she was already pregnant. You look around at all the other ladies and see what's going on, and you just look at yourself and wonder, well, what's wrong with me? I'm not coming up to the mark somehow because I'm not getting the blessings or whatever, that was my mindset back then that other people were getting.
That's so frustrating because you are a young girl. You have no sex education. I don't know what the sexual experience was like. I can't imagine he was super loving. Maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like it was probably a little transactional and you're just thinking, I don't want to be pregnant yet. I mean, I'm still young, but obviously him and his fragile ego taking it the wrong way. And that's so awful that he punished you for that, which made you want to be with him, which is interesting. There's so many things happening in my head right now. Did you feel any sort of sexual attraction toward him or did you just know that you wanted children eventually?
I look back on it and it's like, I got married so young, I didn't really have a plan, but I would just look around and see what was happening with everybody else and want to be a part of it.
Okay.
And that's kind of how it was your whole life in Warren's family. Other people are moving on, getting these blessings, doing these things. Well, you want to be a part of it too. You want to keep up with the Joneses. You don't want to be left behind. So I remember like having excited feelings, like if he held my hand or something like that. But I feel like there was no chemistry really between us. And then there was no effort on his part but he never came and said I was sorry. He was sorry for the way he treated me, or if he finally realized that it was just, I was confused or I really didn't mean that. He never came and apologized and said, hey, let's work this out. Let's try to, nothing like that. It was, with him, it was always the lady's fault if you weren't close to him and didn't have a good relationship with him. That was your responsibility to make it so that your relationship was right with him.
Wow.
And I will say that there was other ladies like me. And then what happened, and I don't know why he chose me for this little role, I guess, in his home, you might say, other than that I had said before, I had a very likable personality. And I have a lot of people tell me, you are such a loving person. So as these ladies would come into the family, he started to have them share a room with me after the house there were so many ladies that we couldn't all have our own room. So he usually had the new lady live with me for a little while, and he would say, help her feel comfortable, help her feel, loved in the family, teach her little things like wait up for Warren when he comes home late from being with father, or there was little things that you could show him that made him feel like you wanted to be with him, or you loved him, or you liked him and wanted a relationship with him. Like if you were a lady that just could care less, then he wasn't going to show you the time of day, and he would give you the silent treatment.
Whoa.
Yeah. I started to have this role of helping and blessing the other ladies as they came in the family to try to help them get close to him.
There's so much to unpack there. You're giving me so much gold, Ada Marie. I'm just like, wait, he taught you how to essentially groom other women to fit his specific needs. And like, this is how you love me. And if you don't do these things, I won't pay attention to you. That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah. I mean, it was basically like that, like the stay up late at night thing to make sure you get to see him, because he did get very busy with his father and you hardly got to see him. So you had to show forth that effort to be where he was, to show him that you were interested in him.
So interesting.
He would say, ladies don't play hard to get, but he could play hard to get. But if we played hard to get, then we wouldn't get anything from him.
I didn't even put the pieces together that this is before he became prophet.
Yes. This is, my relationship, trying to build a relationship with my principal, my teacher, before he became the leader.
And I have to ask, because we did the interview with Ammon, and Ammon is Warren Jeff's son. Where does he fit into all of this? Do you remember interacting with little Ammon?
Absolutely. So another thing that Warren saw that I was really good at was working with his children. So I was on the children all the time. And yes, I used to work with Ammon and his older brothers. I would take them to the zoo and we would clean pens and we would clean gutters. And in my other interview, I give a detailed, everybody wonders what it was like a day in the life of WSJ. Well, I give that in the other interview. And so the children were very monitored with an adult all the time. And it was your responsibility to keep them busy through the day. But back then we had playtime. We had toys, we had the yard, we had games, so there was time for play, there was time for jobs, and then there was time for, bed and get them up in the morning and all that kind of stuff. So yes, I remember Ammon very well.
Aw. He sent baby photos and I was like, stop, they're so cute. Okay, so so what happened when he became prophet? Because I know that a lot of things changed in the community. So how did that affect you and the other wives?
When he became the prophet, he became more secluded, not among the family, hardly at all. And Ammon explained it well in one of his interviews where he said he started portraying that we had to earn his presence. And that's exactly how it was. In my mind, my mentality back then, I thought that he was communicating with God and with Joseph Smith and his father in his room. The home had to be kept very quiet and peaceful. He really hammered down on the children not running in the halls. At one point, he started having some of the men guard his hallway, and they would sit on a chair at the end of the hall by his door. And so if the children came running from came out of the kitchen to run down the hall, then they would stop the children from running. I remember being kind of a little upset and confused about it. It's like feeling like we have this patrol man in our house and the kids are going to be kids and they're going to run when they need to run and whatever. And I do remember having experiences where you felt like you felt the heavenly powers in the home.
Really?
Yeah. I hear the interviews now of people, and I didn't realize that other people have those same kind of feelings as well, So in my mind, I just thought it was very special. It was very heavenly. It was very, and seriously, I thought he was communicating with angels. And he did tell us, I do remember him telling us of one experience when he actually did see his father.
So those feelings that you experienced, do you think it's because you just truly believe that he was a prophet and you were kind of creating those feelings? Or do you really think there was something metaphysical going on?
I look back on it now and I really think it was me building that up in myself. When you believe something so much for so long, then it really happens.
Right.
So, and I will say, he didn't just stand up in front of the family and say, I'm the prophet. He left all of us to come to that conclusion on our own. And so I remember praying fervently, give me a testimony of who the next prophet is. And as far as I remember correctly, he didn't publicly stand up and say that. But what he did was he used other people's testimonies they would get up and bear testimony of the prophet, because obviously they already believed he was the prophet. And then they would like maybe tell experiences of what they remember Reuel Jeff saying, because I guess there's people that heard him say, you know, he had high confidence in Warren and Warren was going to lead after him and all this kind of stuff. So
yeah, that sounds like Keith Raniere from the Nexium cult, one of the more recent ones. He's now in prison, but it was the same situation where we talked to Mark Vicente and Sarah Edmondson, where Keith never claimed all of these special powers and things about himself. He had other people do it, so he looked like this humble guy who's like, oh, I never claimed to be amazing, but everyone else sees it. Like, what can I say? You know, like that type of thing, where it's really powerful. It's a powerful move to do that, because people see that and they think, oh, wow, this is just this humble servant of God. In your case, not in Keith's case, because it wasn't a religious cult. But it's interesting, that tactic, and how it's so effective when you just get other people to do it for you. So what happened when he started taking all of his dad's wives? Do you remember those women coming into the house?
Yes. He was a little concerned about how us ladies would feel. And we had this little meeting, mother's meeting, I refer to it as, because he actually, you know, was telling us that this is what the Lord and Father wanted him to do. And he was, anyway, the gist of it was like he was a little concerned about how we would feel. I do remember going to him personally and saying, Warren, if this is what the Lord and Father want you to do, I want you to know that I support you. You know, I'll accept these ladies and I'll try to be as loving. But I had already been playing that role, kind of. I mean, not playing. I am a naturally loving person. So, and I actually had felt so bad for some of these ladies because I saw them come in and go through the same experience I did. I told him, this is fine with me. I'll try to love everybody. And you know, the quorum thing in Mormonism, there's a quorum of 3, 5, 7. So he started marrying his father's ladies in these quorums of 7 or 5 or 3, whatever it was. He did not receive all of his father's wives. I can think, this isn't very, very many in comparison to how many there were, but I can think of at least a dozen to 15 to maybe even 20 of the ladies that married other men. And they were some of Warren's brothers. It's just kind of close men that Warren had been using and Reuel Jeffs had already been using. He did not marry his mothers that were like his mothers growing up that had bore Reuel Jeffs' children.
Just that sentence. He didn't marry his mothers that were his mothers, but he married the other mothers that weren't really his mothers growing up. It's too much.
Let me rephrase that. He didn't marry his mothers that bore Reuel Jeffs' children. Okay. So they came into his family and under his care as the grandmothers. So they were the grandmothers of actually the grandmothers of Warren's children. So Warren's children and all of us would call them, you know, grandmother so-and-so, grandmother so-and-so. So
interesting. So he didn't marry them, but they were still in the household as grandma.
Yes. Yeah.
Wow. It's a lot. Okay. Is there anything else you want to talk about before we move on to Texas?
I did just want to point out, like, another role I played was teaching school. So after I married him, I assisted 1 year teaching second grade. And then I taught second grade for like 14 years. Wow. So I did get to see how that started and progressed. And I want to say the teachers put a lot into the school, and you didn't get paid. It was all voluntarily. And then when like the curriculum needed to be fixed because it has words in it that aren't proper, it has dress in it that isn't proper, then the teachers had to go in and fix those things. And so we first started with just whiteout and a pen, and then we got smarter on computers and learned how to scan things in and change pictures. And eventually over time, after we had moved to Texas, we were recreating a whole new curriculum. And it was a very educational experience of trying to make up a curriculum. Yeah. And some of us teachers that had taught consistently for so many years we took all the experience we had and tried to make a curriculum for the grade that we had worked in. But everybody thinks of FLDS as not receiving education. Like I said, it depends on what time you grew up. But I just saw the teaching experience go from, it actually was very good when it was a organized, yes, it was a private school after Warren came back down to Short Creek. And then after he became the prophet and went to Texas was when he started these restrictions of the homeschools turned into prominent last names, all grouped together. And then from there, it went from, we're not going to do those anymore, to everybody do homeschool in their own home. And that's when the homeschooling fell apart, because you have a woman that has 8 to 10 children, and what if she's the only wife in the home? She can't do all the chores and teach 5 different grades all at once. And that's where the education of the FLDS went down the drain, I feel like. Because even after he became the prophet, for a year, they had a large Jeff's Academy in the old Phelps Elementary School building where I went to public school when I was younger. And Rulon Jeff's wives and Warren's wives taught there. So I want to say it was 2004 when everything just went to pot for the education from then on.
And you were 17 when you became a teacher then?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And going to Alpha Academy, I had received up to a 10th grade education. And I was trying to graduate 3 years. In 3 years, and I had started trying to do my classes after we moved back south, but it kind of all fell apart, and I ended up helping in 2nd grade anyway, so.
Okay. All right. So he starts disappearing, and no one really knows where he's going except the certain elite people that he chose, and he's building up this Texas compound in El Dorado. So when did you become aware of where he was and what he was doing?
He became the leader in 2002, 8 months to a year later. We started noticing people disappearing. And again, there's that feeling of some people are advancing and going forward, and I don't want to get left behind. So I naturally had those feelings. Long story short, he decides that he needs to remove his children from the property there in Short Creek, because the government was going to come after him and take him away from him. And he had a certain date and a certain time that they had to be off the property. And he informed the mothers that were going with the children, the mothers that were leaving their own children. All that happened in one day. I was told at about 2:00 in the afternoon that I would be going with all these young children. And I was flabbergasted, because first I thought I was going, but it did not register to me that the children would be going. Mm-hmm. And so I was thinking, who's going to stay here and do all the children? Because I had been taking care of children all those years in his family. And then he drops the bomb that they're all coming with us. And I was like, whoa. In my mind, I had visioned this home out in the desert with a flat roof. I don't know, for some reason, it's this flat roof always came to my mind. And I was like, how am I supposed to take care of all these children out in the middle of nowhere with nothing to do, was my thoughts. It was a very emotional experience. And I look back on it now, and it's very tender to me to realize that I was instrumental with him again in causing harm and hurt to other ladies. But also, I hope that I was some comfort to them in going through that experience, because the children knew me and were used to me. So I hope that helped those ladies in that trying time, that at least if they couldn't be with their children, at least they could go with somebody that they trusted and that they knew.
So you mean you felt you caused them harm because you knew that they couldn't come and you went with the kids?
Yes, because that's what Warren was requiring of us. I got called. I was one of the first 5 ladies to go with the children. And that first initial time, none of the biological mothers got to come with the children.
What was that like, seeing them be separated?
It was very emotional, but at the same time, everybody had this, we're going to Zion, And we thought it was necessary because the government was going to come in and steal the children. So we looked at it as a escape, or, what God required of us. We looked at it as the sacrifice that we needed to prove worthy to go on this next mission, the mission of Zion.
And looking back, there wasn't anything actually going on, right? He was just paranoid.
Right. And somewhat to think of him as he was a father, and he did. I think every man that brings forth, has children has somewhat of love for his children. And maybe he was doing this as a way to have his children where he could see him still, because he was on the run and he knew that he needed to be more discreet and not be seen. So maybe he did this to try to bring his children to where he could at least see him somewhat.
That's right. He was on the FBI's most wanted list at this time. So it wasn't totally out of the blue. He was wanted and running.
Yeah, I'm not exactly the dates of when he became on the FBI, but even before that, we had times in Short Creek where they came to our doors and tried to subpoena him. And so we were already always prepared for anything if we needed to flee or if we needed to this or that for our protection. As his wife, I looked at it as he was doing what he needed to protect us.
You get to Texas. How many children are in your care, and what's the age range?
All the children that were 8 years old and younger came, and also his oldest son came. So we had 16 children right at first that came, 5 ladies. And me and one of the other ladies that always took care of the boys were together. So we had I want to say 9 or 10 boys in our care that both of us worked together to take care of them. And there was other ladies that took care of the girls. When we got to Texas, we first lived in trailers. There was one original home there that the previous owner had built there that some of the grandmas came right at the first 2 as well, and they lived in that home. Oh, I'm skipping and going to Texas. I will say, when he first removed us, we went to the land in Colorado, which he called R1. And then we were there for a month before we went to Texas.
Okay.
And it was probably about 2 or 3 weeks before some of the biological mothers started to come. So not all of them. They didn't all come at once, but they started to trickle in here and there.
So now that you're in Texas, he's building that enormous compound structure, which I've seen a bunch of pictures of. How far along was that when you got there?
It had barely started when I got there at the very first. So I watched the first 3 buildings go up. We were living in those trailers while they were building the first 3 buildings. And then one was for Warren's family, one was a storehouse, and then one was a duplex for 2 smaller families to live in. And they were families of other men that had come that were working, doing all the work. So as soon as that big house got built, we moved into it. And that's just kind of how it went through the years. As more and more of his family came, he needed a bigger home. So a bigger home was built, and we would move from that home to the bigger home.
Ammon talks about building a 25,000 square foot home for Warren.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So you lived in that?
Yes. There was one we called the original, or the big house, and that was the first house that they made for Warren's family. Big H-shaped house. And then years down the road, he had this newer one built, and I never got to live in that one. I wasn't good enough to be called into that one that had the big cement walls around it. We called that the new house, and it was a sacred place, and you had to have certain blessings to get to live there and all these restrictions. But at first, yes, I lived in we called it the original house or the big house.
And just for context, guys, because I talked to Ammon, and this never made it into his interview because I forgot to bring it up, but the second house, because he helped build it, was 75,000 square feet.
Yeah, it was huge.
I can't even comprehend what that would look like.
Yeah, I never even saw the inside those walls, except for if I look it up on the internet. Found it on YouTube somewhere and saw the inside footage of it, and I was like, whoa. But I knew some of the women and children that got to go live in there, but I never did myself.
So we're in Texas now, and more people are starting to come in. We know that eventually when the raid happens, there's about 400 children who are taken away. So there's a good amount of people there at the ranch. So let's talk about what was going on there. What are some of the things that you're noticing, that you're seeing that Warren is up to?
Okay, so when we moved to Texas, the thought that was in my head, and I mean, because this is what he would tell us, and mind you, I took everything he said and just tried to live it to my fullest. I was one of those people that completely believed everything he said, never questioned it, I didn't even know that you could. I just gave my all for him and his family, and, to be the strength that I needed to be to try to be a good wife and qualify. So, but he painted it as we were earning the presence of God. So when we first went to Colorado, I had found out that he had basically introduced to us his first 13-year-old wife. And what he said to us, he actually said, the Lord and Father had to work with me for a long time on this one. He acted like this was a requirement of the Lord to start taking these younger ladies to wife. And in my mind, at that time, I didn't even question it. I didn't even think about it being a little girl. In my mind, I thought, she must be somebody so special. The Lord thinks that she's so mature and to be able to enter the celestial law at this young age. That is what my mindset was at the time. And it's crazy to me now, but that shows how brainwashed you can be. And so I knew of one of them, but when we went to Texas, she didn't come. But after a while, then all of a sudden, 2 or 3 of them would show up on the land. And then another time on another visit when he came, 3 of them would come with it, whatever. They started popping up here and there. Pretty soon, he actually moved them all there. So by the time the raid happened, then I want to say all of his younger ladies were there or had been there at least once, because he still had the Colorado land. He still had, and now the South Dakota land was getting built as well. And so, he had family in all 3 of those places. Warren's family has never been under one roof since he became the prophet. So we've always been scattered wherever we were told to go. So we have these younger ladies getting married and getting pregnant. I didn't think anything of it. Like I said, I thought it was just that they were special and so mature and all that. But when the raid happened, and I don't know if he did this because maybe he was starting to feel guilty for the way he had treated me, but he allowed me to take care of another lady's little baby. She was 12 months old, and he had her leave the land. This little girl's mother left the land with another one of her children to go work with that child to help him be more obedient. But now he required of this lady that sacrifice to separate from her young child. And she was only 12 months old. And this 12-month-old child was left in my care. This is the one lady that I told you she's kind of related to me, distantly related. So I was taking care of this. Well, I had taken care of this little girl for about a year. Her mother had come back, but when the raid happened, she was gone to see Warren in Kingman. So I had her at the time the raid happened. And when I think back on the raid, I had one thing in my mind, and it was to take care of this little girl. I didn't try to get into all the business of what was happening and why they were there and what they were doing. She was my priority, and I stuck right with her. That was my whole focus through the whole thing. But I was taken off the land with her when we had communication still. I talked with her mother once, and she said, whatever happens, don't let them take her from you. And I said, they don't want the little ones. They want the older girls. Because by that time, we could realize that's what was happening. And she's like, they want all the children. And I just burst into tears. It was very stressful. We went through the experience of going to the different places they had us go to. The sleeping conditions weren't good. The food wasn't the greatest. The bathroom conditions and showering was horrible. Like I didn't shower for 3 or 4 days because you couldn't, and you didn't have clothes. And it was a big ordeal to try to get the people that were back on the land to send us some clothes so that we could get cleaned up. And we were hard to deal with. We wouldn't give any information. I will say that. There's a thing in the FLDS, mum is the word. And that was what we were told to do. So, like, by the time I went into this little interview with some people, I was holding the little girl that I had, and they tried, all I would give them is my name and her name. And then I just says, I don't want to say anymore without a lawyer. And so, hence the big mix up of everything being all mothers and who they belong to and children and everything was a big mess because part of it was because we wouldn't talk. I forget the exact dates of how long we were in custody, but finally I was separated from this little girl. I'm going to get mixed up between Coliseum and Civic Center and all that kind of stuff. So wherever we were, they were taking all the children that didn't have their parents with them and that were a certain age and putting them in one place. So I was just a caretaker. I wasn't the biological mother of this child. So they were going to separate me from her at this time. And we went in, and one of the CPS workers tried to peel her away from me, and she hung on to me and grabbed me. And it was very, very stressful. I said, wait a minute here. And what they told me was that just let her take the child and you'll get to come back with her. And so to feel her resistance in getting pulled away from me, there was another FLDS girl. She wasn't even in our family, but she looked like us. And so I said, can I give her to this older girl? And they said, yes. So I handed the little one to this other girl. I had actually taught her in 2nd grade there on the land. And so I knew who she was. And so then the little one I was holding was okay with going to this person that she was used to. I mean, it looked like somebody she was used to. So they took me into this room, and I'll never forget, like, the picture is still in my mind. There's all these Texas Rangers with their hands on their hips and their cowboy hats on and guns on the side of them, just lining the walls. And I was devastated, and still always in my mind what this little one's mama had said to me, don't let them take her from you. And they stepped up to me and said, we're going to have to ask you to come over here because you look like you're under 18. I was 24 years at the time, 24 years old. And so then I get this resistance that comes up. I'm not under 18. I have a license, and I was one of the few people that had a license with me to prove it. So I showed them my license. They decided it was okay. I know that some people, they wouldn't even believe their licenses, and they just kept them when they were adults. But then I was mad at myself because when my senses came to my head, if I had not shown them my ID, I could have gone back with the little girl.
Oh.
But I was under so much stress and who knows after that if they would have separated us again, because that big group of children did get farmed out to different places. But it just was a weight that I carried on my shoulder for a long time. It wasn't my fault that she had to go through more trauma because I didn't answer the right thing and do the right thing.
I mean, you did the best that you could, and under so much pressure and in survival mode and defense mode. Mm-hmm. Did the little girl get reunited with her mom eventually?
Eventually she did, but what happened to her was she went with a big group of children to a certain place. And actually another one of Warren's ladies, she didn't have her ID to prove. So she was just 1 year younger than me, would have been 23. She had to stay in state custody, but she got to be there with that big group of children. It was one of the places that had the biggest group of them. Don't know the name right off the top of my head, but so she actually got a hold of this little girl and was able to take care of her through the whole experience of being separated from the mothers, which I was very grateful. But we did find out that she had this little yellow pillow that was her security. And when Warren had her mama leave and I took over her when she was 12 months old, that little pillow became her security. Found out on her 3rd birthday, she spent it alone in the hospital, and that little yellow pillow was lost. And that just tore my heart to pieces, because if she had any security, she needed that little yellow pillow, and she didn't have it. And one of the other ladies told me she tried to go with her to the hospital, but they wouldn't let her.
Why was she in the hospital?
She had a cold or a flu or something. And I guess it was bad enough that they felt like she needed to go in and get checked or something. So I was removed from her and went back to the ranch and walked up those deck stairs. And all 3 of the ladies that had been taking care of this woman's children, we all got booted out. And by this time, the mother of them was back at the ranch. She had tried multiple times to come down and get in to the shelters and where we were, but they would not allow people in. So we come walking up the stairs, and there she is. And here's all the 3 ladies that had been taking care of her children. And we all just wrapped our arms around each other and bawled and cried. And I said, I am so sorry. I tried everything I knew to do. And she was so sweet. She didn't hold it against us at all. She just held us. We all cried together. And she said, thank you so much for all you did.
Wow. That's so heartbreaking.
Hence the visit started. And then Mama was able to go see the children and stuff. And I had to stay away from that because they had me all mixed up in as her mother, and her mother didn't want any problems with, everything. So I didn't get to see her until she was completely, we called it non-suited, where everything was wrapped up, and she did get reunited with her mother. But then for a time, the mother stayed in the San Angelo area until you had everything completely wrapped up with CPS and everything. When each of his ladies would get non-suited, he had them immediately go to hiding. I'm assuming that so that he felt like nothing else could happen to him, because I'm sure he felt like his family was a target because of him. And I will say at this time too, I do remember people going to see him at the prison, and he would say, just let go of me and all this will stop. Just let go of me. And, and we would say, no, I didn't go personally, but other people would say, no, we're not going to let go of you. We know you're the prophet. We're going to stand by you. And
oh, man. Okay. I feel like let's backtrack a little bit. So the reason that he was put in prison, it's complicated, and he was kind of shuffled from Utah to Texas and handed over in custody and everything. But within part of the raid, even though they were called and it was kind of like a false call getting them in, like that's how they were able to get into the compound with a warrant, because of a call saying someone was being abused by the name of Sarah. There wasn't anyone there by the name of Sarah. But within that raid, looking for the Sarah, they were able to find through journals that there were underage wives, and within that, they were able to raid the temple, found recordings, documents showing what Warren was up to with these young girls, and then that's why he's in prison now. So through all of that, he was calling them heavenly sessions, and I know that you wanted to speak to your experience with everything that went on there.
Yes. So it was March of 2006. And I'll tell the experience first, and then I'll just give a wrap up of what I have come to realize was happening through the years, which is very appalling. It just blows your mind. In 2004, he started first with like this revelation that would be read to the ladies. And he would say, the end of section 132 states that, which is the law on celestial marriage.
Doctrine and Covenants from Joseph Smith.
Yeah. So the phrase at the end of that says, and I, the Lord, will reveal more. So he told us that he read this revelation and said, this is the more that the Lord was talking about. And first, my experience was I was in a little training session, you might say. First with him, he read this revelation, and you were to take all your clothes off in front of these 3 women and in front of him. And it was like to familiarize yourself being naked with other women.
Completely naked.
Yeah.
And this is coming from a place where you are in these dresses that are head to toe, completely covered. Modesty is very important. I just want to make sure everyone understands the context of nudity within what you're used to.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. All of that. And then, like I mentioned before, to his ladies, like, we weren't supposed to talk to each other about your sexual stuff with him at all. So all of a sudden you're stripping down in front of other ladies. And I look back on it now and I feel like he did this to kind of familiarize you to be a part of these sessions.
Yeah.
So first there's this revelation so that you think that it's from God. I want to say it was months later before I was named. And here you are thinking that you have to be good enough to have your name named to be a part of these things, because the Lord names to him who can come into these training sessions and then eventually these heavenly sessions. So probably a few months later, I want to say sometime in 2005, then I get called in to be in this little training session with 2 other women. Warren's not even there. He wasn't even on the land at that time. And it was like, that was where I first learned some of the things that where people touch you to excite you and different things like that. Mm-hmm. And it was 3 women doing this together. But you were supposed to have a prayer for him in your mind through it all, because if you had anything other than that, it was wicked. So it's like you're doing this for Warren, thinking of him through the whole time, and that's what made it okay and righteous.
And he's commanding this through prison. He's commanding these female orgies in his name.
This one was in 2005, was before he was taken to prison.
Okay.
This little this little training session, he wasn't on the land, but he was still not in prison yet.
Okay.
So there's these little training sessions going on, again, to like one step further to familiarize you with this new way of having sex and getting pregnant. I was a part of one of those. And then it wasn't until March of 2006 that I got called into an actual heavenly session. I look back on it. It was very uncomfortable, but at the same time, if you didn't give the right reaction, the consequence was either getting sent away or getting shunned because you didn't give the right reaction. So you wouldn't get to be a part of another one for a long time until you said your prayers and repented and was righteous enough. And this was the new way to have a child. So if you wanted to get pregnant, you had to be good enough to be in one of these.
Oh my gosh. Get pregnant. He held that over your head. So this is the only time he would be intimate with his wives was these group sessions.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow.
So you have all this bearing down upon you to try to be good enough to be a part of one of these. So I remember when I went in, we always knelt down and said a prayer before we went in his room, because it was like this heavenly place. And we always thought that there was heavenly beings around. And I do also remember like thinking that you could come into the presence of God, maybe not during the session, because the sessions were supposed to revive him from near death because he was atoning for the people.
Oh my gosh, there's so many layers here.
Yeah. So maybe after the session, I thought in my mind, if we were one and united and had our prayers fervently enough, that maybe we would see God in there, in his room. So we go in. First, he had the ladies shower together to be completely clean. And you were supposed to wash each other. And a prayer was said while you washed each other and touched each other in certain places and all that. One lady that had the prayer memorized, she would say it out loud and you would repeat it after her. So you get cleaned up. This prayer is said. In the one I was in, I did not experience him go into the convulsions, or maybe they had already happened, because by the time I got in there. Other ladies were already in there, and he was laying on the floor. And so once everybody was in the room and ready, then it was like everybody working together to sexually, through sexual excitement and whatever, bringing him back to life because he had atoned for the people.
Whoa. Can we just pause
Yeah.
for a second? So I'm trying to wrap my head around this. There's so many levels of coercion and manipulation here. He's hanging over your head. This is how you get pregnant if you want a child.
Mm-hmm.
He's saying that if you don't respond and react in the right way, I'm going to send you away, potentially away from your own children that you already have and me and the Holy Land of Zion. He's saying that he's atoning for everybody's sins like Jesus, and it's your job to bring him back to life through these sexual experiences, and you're forced to do it with other women.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just like, holy cow. And he's telling you that these underage women are part of what God wants, just like Joseph Smith said, right? He's like, well, I don't want to do it, but God said, or this angel with a flaming sword said, so I have to. Whoops, such a bummer. But really, he's orchestrating this entire thing for his own sexual gratification at
Absolutely.
the expense of all of these women and girls.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow.
It's terrible now that I reflect back on it. And it's so terrible for me to think that I thought that was godlike, that it was what you were, the heavenly thing to do.
Well, I can't blame you for that.
It's terrible.
I mean, I'm definitely not judging. I mean, you were completely manipulated in this whole situation. I mean, from birth, you've been manipulated to feel and think and act these certain ways and conditioned, and it was just part of your reality. So I don't hold any judgment for you there. I completely understand the headspace. Well, I'm trying to understand the headspace that he had created for his wives, for these women who are doing these things. So is there anything else that you want to share about them?
Not really. I mean, that was just the gist of it but you were actually, once he was alive enough to be sexually active, then you're actually just like witnessing him having sex with whoever he's having sex with right there.
So people are just standing around watching?
Well, you're supposed to continue to
have sex with each other.
Yeah, like you're
with the other women,
helping the other women feeling excited and doing things like that. So it's like this group, everything together.
Yeah.
And then whenever he says he's done, then, then it stops. And he used these words to me. When are you going to like me again? As far as like going to have sex with him again. So after this heavenly session, when I go up and give him a hug or whatever, then he's like, finally, you liked me again. And I was like, I remember thinking, well, back then I was like, I've liked you all along. I just haven't had the opportunity to, I wanted to, but anyway, but now I'm just like, you son of a bitch. It pisses me off. It's just like, ugh.
So at one time, how many girls or women would he have doing these sessions together?
It was always a quorum. The one that I was a part of I think there was 5 of us. So I just wanted to point out, after he was taken to prison, then these little sessions also continued. I wouldn't say near as regularly. It was like for a time it was taken away, and then it was like the ladies had to prove worthy for it to be back again. And so here you have all of his ladies like praying fervently that this blessing can continue or whatever. And so I was called into, it was just a session of 3 ladies. And it was like one of them was supposed to be Warren because now he's in prison. And I don't know if the recording, like if they recorded this and these were sent in to him, or I don't know the extent of all that. But I just know that like one lady kind of acted like she was him laying there on the bed, and you're supposed to do the same thing, like sexually arouse her. But in the whole time you're supposed to have in your mind, I'm doing this for Warren. I'm doing this for Warren. And he's supposed to be your thoughts. And my mindset at the time was, if that this strength will go on the wings of prayer and strengthen him in the prison, because he's atoning for the people in prison, and he still needs this to be brought back to life again through this sexual contact or whatever, however you say it.
Whoa.
I have a heart for the ladies that would get told to do these things because they were under that same manipulation. I don't hold it against them at all, because also when you were one of those uppity ones, then who knows what the stress they were going through. Like if they resisted or hesitated, to have him look at you and say, are you hesitating or whatever, I can only imagine the pressure that they were under. So being one of his ladies, I have love and compassion for the ladies that kind of push this through for him. And I love them dearly. I always will.
Oh, man. And before we wrap up, because we're definitely going to do a second episode, there's a lot to cover. I know that you wanted to speak to the fact that you didn't actually see those younger girls in these sessions, or how do you want to say it?
I will just say the ladies that participated in the one heavenly session I was a part of were all older women. Some of them, and I look back on it, seems to me like the way he would do it is another way to familiarize you with this was he would choose ladies that you were kind of close to or more friends with, I guess, because you did more with them. Like, so the heavenly session I was a part of was ladies that had worked with the children, and then maybe a more experienced wife. And so I did not witness ever him sexually doing anything to the younger ladies. Obviously, there's evidence that one of the younger ones did have a child, but I just want to say that for myself.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you for sharing all of that. It really adds new perspective to hearing about the heavenly sessions. I watched it on Keep, Sweet, Pray, and Obey, and it was just heartbreaking seeing all that evidence come out. And so to hear it from your perspective is really valuable. So I appreciate you being willing to share that.
Thank you. It's hard to talk about, but
yeah.
I just feel like people need to know, and especially people that still try to, and I'm not out here to try to get everybody to leave the FLDS religion, but if they would stop and think, this is the man that I'm following, and this is what he was all doing in the name of God. And I'm far beyond that point that it's just okay for him to say that all this evil, immoral stuff is okay because God told him to do it.
Yeah.
It's like, no, he doesn't have that right. He's not some super special person to be able to do that and say that it's okay.
I think once you're able to separate Warren from this prophet that you've built up in your mind, everything sort of falls into place, and you can recognize that he's just acting as a man. And I'm sure you can look back and see all of the reasons that he did what he did for his own gratification, and the manipulation and the coercion. It all just kind of falls on its face, and it falls apart once you can separate what he was doing, prophet, man, So this has been such a great episode. I definitely want to come back and do a second one where we talk about life after Warren was in prison and how that affected you as one of his wives, and how you were able to eventually get out and deconstruct and everything there. So with that, really quickly, I need your Linda Listen moment, your sassy statement, viral video as the toddler goes, or something inspirational for our viewers. It's up to you.
Okay, I wrote this down, so I might have to look over here at this a little bit. But Linda, listen, if you are in a situation where someone makes you go against what you feel is right in your heart, whether it's morally, whether it's giving up communication and associating with your family members, whether it's he's telling you to shun people and judge people, listen to your heart and return to your heart and get rid of the heart that he has made of you because of his manipulating ways.
I love it. That's great. Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on, Ada Marie. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Shelise, for having me. I really have found a lot of strength in listening to stories on your channel and Sam and Melissa's channel, and also John and Margie's channel around Mormon stories. And I don't think I'd be able to do this without having to have listened to other survivors. And I just hope the best for everyone.
Oh, I love hearing that. That's so great. And it is such a great community. I love all those people you mentioned. They're awesome. We collab often, and it's so great when we can all come together and lift up everyone's voice. I don't see them as competition. They're just other people doing the Lord's work. No, I have to joke. So, yes, we will come back and do another episode. Do you have any other final thoughts before we go?
Just thank you so much for letting me be here, giving me this platform.
Yes, absolutely. Guys, leave those comments down below, those words of encouragement. We all read the comments, and it's so great to see what you have to say. And if you want to reach out, you can find her on Instagram at AdaDraper1 or on Facebook under Ada Draper. And we'll put all of the links in the description so that you can reach out if you'd like to do so. And if you'd like to become a patron, patreon.com/cults2consciousness. If you'd like to buy some merch, cults2consciousness.com under the merch tab. And if you like this video, I'll link 2 more down here below. And until next time, follow your highest excitement, be conscious, and be well.